So when we look at the war on terror, we see that a huge part of it has to do with philosophy, right? They don't want people to prefer death or fighting to the death to Western oligarchical sexual control, the sexual control of the governing class. So the West has an authoritarian agenda, okay, no matter how you slice it. Either you believe in a left-right paradigm, and there's a bunch of, rich, greedy people who are pushing people around and trying to confuse them, and they have some kind of plan. Maybe you believe in the New World Order. Or you're among the minority who believes that the political parties are magically what they claim to be, and they magically just believe what they claim to believe, and they're arguing with each other. And their clear-cut mistakes are something that they just happen to be making, in regards to how serious a problem racism is, in regards to how, in regards to immigration, instead of just coming up with logical solutions and a comprehensive solution, which a first grader can come up with if they spend enough time on it, they just play stupid, right? So as we look at this thing, we see that there's clearly an agenda that includes an authoritarian push to force people into sexual control. Maybe you believe it's just the left. Maybe you believe it's just the right. Maybe you believe it's a right-left paradigm. But everyone basically believes that there's a drastic agenda at play here to control people sexually to some degree. They don't see it as clearly as I do. They're not targeted, which sheds more light on it, like I am. And they don't all agree on where it's coming from, but they agree that it's there and it's not going anywhere. And whether they see it that way or not, they agree that it affects the war on terror. Okay, there's still a war on terror going on. There's still psychological operations that are taking place in order to combat the spread of various philosophies. And just like with anti-Semitism, they're painting with a broad brush. They're painting with a broad brush. And they're making it seem like anyone who disagrees with an American philosophy is, the enemy of the state. And that's how they're playing it. That's a huge part of what targeting is about. Targeting isn't about just people who are outspoken. It's about refining their technique of harassing people who are outspoken and playing sick sexual games with the population. It is a left-right paradigm where they control both parties. And it's what's called Roman ludus, which is what's going on. Romans were notorious for corruption. They were notorious for rape and sexual immorality. There's been attempts over the years to try to cover that up, believe it or not. As absurd as those attempts are, as clear-cut as it is, they worship Cupid, and the Greeks worship Eros, where we get the word erotic desire. Okay, they have a pagan deity of so-called love, and Romans, they went around raping and enslaving people and abusing them left and right. So their deity of love wasn't exactly a deity of a moral love. It was a deity of a kind of corporate, corrupt state, sort of erotic desire and abuse and fixation, a sick fixation on sex and sexual control. In fact, the word corporation comes from the Romans, as far as anyone knows. It was around 500 AD under Emperor Justinian. I know that because I looked into it and I made a video about it, and I've been talking about it on and off over the years. So the Romans, in a nutshell, were scum. And the most powerful secret society that anyone knows of in terms of power that people can quickly quantify to some degree is the Club of Rome. Okay, of all the secrets of Freemasons and on and on and on, Pilgrim Society, Bohemian Club, on and on and on, the most powerful one of them in popular culture is the Club of Rome. And the Freemasons are basically a Greco-Roman society. It's a long story why that is. It has to do with, just like with Christianity, you have a Roman perspective of Christianity that goes around the world to the point where, the Catholic Church, the main branch of it at least, is often called the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? And you had the Eastern Empire of Rome, which came up with the Orthodox Church. Okay, and then you had the Protestants that branched from the Catholic Church, basically. Okay, so you have all these kind of Roman-rooted religions and philosophies and secret societies. And the Club of Rome, as far as I can tell, is not a Catholic organization. It is an erotic desire, Western culture pushing organization. Why these people from various places in the world come together in a Club of Rome has to do with the fact that Roman culture, okay, Western culture is basically neo-Roman culture. And I've covered this in probably over 100 videos by now, maybe even over 200. It's a huge part of understanding the world. Okay, what is going on is a Roman agenda. When people cite the New World Order, they often cite it as starting in Rome, as the Romans having a vision of taking over the world. Okay, if you compare Roman soldiers to American soldiers, there's strong parallels and similarities. Okay, the similarities in size and shape, the mentality. So only recently are they starting to think about reducing the amount of gear that they carry and, relying more on drones and less on tanks. The Romans were very much associated with Assyrians, who to the ancient Egyptians were associated with Set, as Set was associated with the jackal, the turtle, the snake, as he was associated with Apep. Okay, and the turtle refers to a certain form of fighting and trying to dominate things, which has to do with being big and strong, has to do with wearing armor, stuff like this, right? It was compared to a turtle because they move slowly. Now imagine, for example, for those of you who don't understand martial arts that well, if somebody who was trying to take on, say, Jet Li, or Jackie Chan in a movie where he's moving fast with his sword and maybe he has light armor on, maybe he doesn't, and they're wearing a lot of armor. You see, Jet Li would win, right, one-on-one, and you think it was like a kind of joke, right? How are you going to win if you're moving slowly? And there's ways for somebody who does martial arts to strike you effectively, even if you have a lot of armor on. Unless you have so much armor on, you're like not moving at all or something, then you're just kind of fortified. You're not really doing hand-to-hand combat anyway, right? So they can strike you in the leg and strike you in the eye. They can keep hitting you in the helmet again and again, and break your neck that way, paralyze you that way. There's a lot of things they can do, right? And so the turtle was not taken seriously. It was like a way of insulting somebody, right? To the ancient Egyptians, who had come from a long line of people who did hand-to-hand combat and martial arts in a way that has to do with speed, agility, defense, dexterity, striking, what have you. And this is significant because the Romans, they were jealous of the Egyptians. This is kind of lost in time to some degree. Now, how do we know this? Well, because the main deity of Rome is Zeus, and his Egyptian counterpart is Set, who's a deity of chaos, confusion, rape by deception, the principles of evil, including jealousy. Right? Set was jealous of Horus. He was jealous of Osiris. In the Osirian mysteries, he kills Osiris. Okay, and he's a deity of storms and so on. Long before Zeus comes into being, there was Set. So Zeus is based on Set. And Zeus is the hippo form, which is one of Set's form, right? He has various forms: the jackal, the hippo, the aardvark, the dog, the wolf, as their variations of the jackal and the fox and so on and so forth. Okay, but he also has the hippo form and the boar. And the boar is similar to the turtle, and there's that armored form of fighting. Think about the way a boar fights, a hippo fights, what have you. Set, however, from my understanding, is not associated with the elephant, who takes on deeper African meaning in the African context. In the Western context, it's simply the symbol of the Republican Party, and they make it in a way that's, kind of parody, a mockery. It could very well be a mockery of African culture. Who knows? Okay, so now some of you might be wondering, what does this have to do with the War on Terror? Well, if we go to the essence of American culture, right, the American eagle, the eagle was a symbol of Rome and the symbol of Zeus. As Zeus was said to transform into eagle to rape Ganymede. And a lot of these LGBT rapes in the churches, of rapes of little boys, have occurred in Roman Catholic churches. They also Protestants as well. Remember, they sprung from the Catholics. They have secret societies in common, not just the Masons, the Freemasons. They overlap in various ways. Political parties, corporations, they have all kinds of overlap, and secret society overlap. But anyway, so America's based on sexual immorality. Okay? So you have kind of two Americas. One is the America they tell you about. The other one is the secret government of America. Now, if someone's really a patriot, they don't want me to be quiet or something. They don't want to cover this up because, you got to look at it as what is worth having in your country, what is worth keeping, what is worth discarding, what is worth having. Okay, the occult is an abomination, and it has drastically brought down America. That's why we have $37 trillion in debt. That's why we have 800,000 homeless people in the street. When you think about it, for example, the occult, where it affects rock and roll, there's tens of millions of people in the rock and roll in America, right? Now imagine if all those people were instead followers of Horus instead of followers of Set through heavy metal and rock and roll. Okay, they would organize, and and in homelessness, they would organize and they'd vote for the right politicians and so on and so forth. Not politicians, but the right people to lead. They didn't do that. They didn't do that for the same reason I'm having trouble talking in this video, because there's a bunch of occultists who are running sops on people and abusing people and even fuming me, even while I'm making this video right now. Okay? And as a result, and you look at the cultures, they're derived from the occult. They're followers of Zeus, the eagle, instead of followers of Horus, who's symbolized by the falcon. Now, obviously, I don't like Zeus, but in terms of the eagle as an animal, it's just a bird. I don't necessarily have anything against it. Okay, I don't. Why would I? But in the occult context, it is being used in an evil way. In fact, the word evil is similar to the word eagle. Eagle, evil, eagle kind of thing. And then you have the ego, right? Evil, E-vi-L. Evil is also vile, scrambled. Okay, so it's E, which goes back to the E words. One of my least favorite parts of the wordplay is the E words, because it seems like a stretch, but it's not. Okay, you get silly, goofy, shady, pervy, fatty, sloppy. All the E words refer to like states of demons. And when it comes to their depictions of angels, which they pretend aren't E's but are, okay, they're fairy, right? E, they're fairy-like. They're sissy, they're pansy, they're wussy, they're pussy. Going back to the E words. Effeminate, emasculate, starts with the E. And there's so many of these words, and they come together a certain way that makes it clear that they're for people who aren't serious martial artists, which is the easiest way to put it. Serious martial artists of God. Okay. They are sketchy, dorky, nerdy. There are other things. Goes back to the wordplay on the word beast. The word beast is beta scrambled, and there's also a brute beast, as they talk about in Proverbs 30, I believe it is. Okay, so what is the answer here? The answer is to rally and obey God to me first and foremost. Everything else is just wasting your time. First of all, for those of you who might say, well, of course he says that's the answer. Yeah. Okay, think about it like this. What were other people doing while this was playing out? What are they recommending? What do their actions tell you? Are they just another cop, just another business person, just another person in the church, just another bootlicker following the crowd? So who do you think should lead? The one person doing the right thing the whole time, or a bunch of cowards everywhere? And if they were to argue, well, they don't know the information I know, well, I had to start somewhere. You go back to when I was 16. I was rebelling so much I was sent to reform school. I was rebelling against evil. You go back to 2009, 16 years ago. Okay, I had nowhere near the same amount of research 16 years ago. When I started making these videos, I'd done some research, into Egypt, into secret societies, okay, but I didn't have years and years of research under my belt. So what I was doing in 2009, just like right now, is infinitely greater than what everyone else is doing with the information they have. In fact, what I was doing in 1997, 1998 is greater than what other people are doing right now. So there's this huge gap when it comes to leadership qualifications between me and other people.